Good evening and welcome to 1010, your top 10 news in 10 minutes. I'm Andy Hong. Yeah, I know it's only Thursday today, but our studio happens to be closed on Saturdays for the time being. Bugger. But one of the perks of being on summer break, we can manage to work on weekdays too. Now, I don't know if that's a perk or not, but now that we have that clear, let's get to it. Now, Greece is in some hot water right now. Its debt crisis is getting worse by the day, and disputes between Greek politicians and their international creditors aren't helping the people of Greece. In coping with the economic turmoil, Greece technically already defaulted on its debts as it did not pay a scheduled 1.5 million euros to the IMF on Tuesday. The people are facing a historic referendum coming up on Sunday on whether they agree or disagree with the offer put forward by Greece's creditors last week, which the Greek government rejected. Greece has one of the highest unemployment rates in Europe, 25.6%. Many are seeing their life savings evaporate before them because of the financial instability, and now they must vote on a referendum that, according to the New York Times, few Greeks understand thoroughly. The Greek government is urging its people to vote no on the referendum, asserting that it is typical European Union tyranny. This might be the end for Greece's membership in the Eurozone. We'll see what happens by next week. Meanwhile, British Petroleum reached a settlement to compensate for the 2010 Deepwater Horizon oil spill disaster that killed 11 and spilled 125 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico. BP is due to complete its payment of $4.25 billion to individuals and businesses affected by the spill, and now this newest fine brought on by the Department of Justice through the Clean Water Act involves $18.7 billion in payments. According to BP, they already need to pay more than $40 billion, excluding this new fine. In all fairness, BP was responsible for one of the worst man-made environmental disasters in U.S. history, so it's pretty fitting that the company should pay the largest settlement ever paid by a single company in American history. ISIS claimed many of the attacks that occurred last week, one of which claimed the latest figure of 38 lives, 30 of which were British. ISIS didn't stop there. Simultaneous attacks in the Sinai Peninsula killed 17 Egyptian soldiers, according to the Egyptian military, at least 100 ISIS soldiers. This is the latest show of force and expansion by ISIS in its latest bout of terror attacks during the Islamic holy month of Ramadan. The Egyptian military released a statement that the situation is under control, and we all hope so. So, the prison break incident in upstate New York came to an end last week when escapee 1 Richard Matt was shot and killed. Escapee 2 David Sweat was shot and captured close to the Canadian border, and 2 prison employees were arrested for assisting the 2 in their escape. Now that that's more or less over, someone reported today in the Washington Navy Yard that shots were fired. Investigators have announced that everything is clear after a lockdown, but people are still uneasy as the Navy Yard was the site of a shooting 2 years ago that killed 12 civilians. Some are reporting that it was a hoax, but authorities are taking the issue very seriously. This week had a whole lot of transportation disasters. Another ferry disaster in the Philippines, another train accident in the Midwest, a deadly plane crash in Indonesia, and a new insight into that airplane crash in Taiwan. We'll look into them one by one, starting with the ferry in the Philippines. 189 were on board a wooden ferry when it suddenly capsized shortly after leaving port, leaving 34 dead and 30 missing. This isn't the first ferry disaster in the islands. Poor regulations and maintenance in the majority of the ferry fleet in the Philippines have led to a host of problems as ferries are heavily used. In Tennessee, a CSX train car carrying acrylonitrile, a flammable and toxic chemical, derailed and ignited, causing thousands to be evacuated from the area. According to CBS, 5,000 people in a 2-mile radius. At most 2 days could go by before the area is secure again. Also, as shown in the picture above, an Indonesian Air Force C-130 cargo plane slammed into a residential area in Sumatra just 2 minutes after takeoff, killing 140. The investigation is still ongoing. Last but not least, remember that TransAsia plane crash in Taiwan 5 months ago that killed 43 people? It seems as though the pilot made a critical mistake when he reduced throttle on the wrong engine when one of the engines suddenly went idle. TransAsia has a lot to answer to in terms of its pilot training, but the investigation is not due to be completed until April of next year. There's been a chronic wet and rough weather in the east with rain, hail, and tornadoes, but for the sake of local news, we're going to look at the west where chronic dryness and wildfires are tearing up the dry brush. In Southern California, fires in the Moreno Valley east of Los Angeles is about 25% contained, while another fire that's been burning for 2 weeks in the San Bernardino National Forest is around 70% contained. As you can see in the picture above, Washington State is really feeling the heat this summer. 30 homes have been destroyed in Wenatchee, and the fire is now about 80% contained. MERS is still ongoing in South Korea as another case emerged after a 4-day lull in new cases, but now 2 more possible cases of Ebola in Liberia have caught the world's attention after the country was, according to CNN, declared Ebola-free 7 weeks ago. Fortunately, the government immediately took action to quarantine the villages where the new cases emerged after the death of a 17-year-old boy who had Ebola. However, the herbalist who attempted to treat the boy has apparently run off, possibly to avoid being quarantined. There is still a pervasive confusion as to whether the cases are actually confirmed or not, but authorities are not taking any chances as 11,000 have died in the last outbreak. A 68-year-old man became the 7th person bitten by a shark in North Carolina in the past 3 weeks, with 2 attacks in South Carolina this year. There have been no fatalities so far, fortunately. The number of shark attacks are uncommonly high this year, but remember that it's much more likely to get killed by a hippo than a shark. Don't pack your machete and harpoon gun, but if you really are concerned, bring some first aid kits just in case. The FIFA Women's World Cup in Canada is coming to a close as the United States and Japan once again advance to the finals. Germany was steamrolled on by the American team 2-0. Congrats to the winning team. You guys played very well. The score says it all. You deserve it. I'm sorry I wasn't really celebrating because I'm a diehard Deutsche Fußball-Bund fan. You guys had another great run, Germany. Hopefully next time you guys come out on top. Everybody else is laughing right now. Screw you guys. Germany's still better. I'm sorry. The Americans have been playing very well lately, though. If I recall correctly, the Mannschaft ranked number 1 in the world after that Brazil World Cup lost to the Klinsmann crew in 2-1 in a home game in Köln. This is a sign that the United States might finally show a greater interest in soccer and start calling it by its actual name, football. Perhaps. The England versus Japan match for the semifinals was even more tragic for the English team, as an own goal in the final minute of the stoppage time led to Japan's 2-1 victory. The two teams were more or less evenly matched. How horrible it must have been for the defender who scored the own goal. More or less, the final match will once again be Japan versus the USA. In the 2011 World Cup, Japan beat the United States in penalty kicks, while the USA got right back at Japan in the 2012 London Olympics by winning 2-1 to claim the gold medal. Will Japan be able to drag the game out and tire out the American team like the last World Cup? Or will the United States use its goal-scoring decisiveness to end the match in its favor? We'll find out on the 5th. Also, sorry England, but an hoorah for the German team for their match for 3rd place on the 4th. Okay, so I'm really excited for the mostly pixel-free pictures of Pluto that the New Horizons probe just sent back from its 9-year-long flight, but the real deal isn't going to begin until the next week, because the probe is due to its closest approach to the dwarf planet on the 14th. So I'll save that news for next week and go over something a bit closer to home for this week's science news. The Solar Impulse solar power plane finally broke the record for the longest flight without refueling when its pilot Andrei Borschberg flew for 76 hours and beyond. The plane only runs on 17,000 photovoltaic cells, no fossil fuels involved. The cells don't provide a lot of power, so the plane has low thrust and a 72-meter wingspan to create the lift needed. By the time he reaches Hawaii, he will have flown for 120 hours, despite some hitches in the flight plan due to weather. The two pilots, Borschberg and Bertrand Piccard, who take on different legs of the journey on their single-seat plane, are determined to succeed in their attempted circumnavigation on the Solar Impulse. And that was the Ten10 news for the week. I'm Andy Hong. AP test scores are coming out soon. Hope you guys get good scores. I mean, even if you don't, Donald Trump is probably going to say something stupid again, and that'll make you laugh, so no worries. Anyways, have a great July 4th weekend. Remember that there's a terror alert for the weekend, so make sure you're safe. If you're taking a boat trip, make sure dolphins don't get on board, but that's a different story. Also, make sure to like us on Facebook and YouTube, and we'll see you next week with more of your top 10 news in 10 minutes. Stay educated.